You follow him. Was he at a table talk session talking to his ministers? Who was he talking to? We have to know the context, and I'm willing to have that interaction with any of my good brothers or sisters from the Nation of Islam. It's not a problem. But I'm just showing you how complex accepting a single statement out of the ether can be for people who are crying for direction, as we are.
And if I'm correct, Minister Farrakhan followed the teachings of W.D. Muhammad for at least 6 years.
3 years. 3 years. Up until the end of 1978.
78.
Yes, sir.
So Elijah Muhammad passed away in 75 until about 78. Because I know he officially resurrected, so to speak, the Nation of Islam as we know it now in about 81.
Yes.
So from 78 to 81, what happened?
Well, that's an easy story. Understand also that what you're saying now reinforces what I just finished saying about content and context. If we were to take the snapshot of Minister Farrakhan's support for Imam Muhammad, beginning with Savior's Day, 1975, when he said, his father told us that he would be the next one. You got that? That's on YouTube. You know, that's not in some secret society book. That's right on YouTube. Just Google Savior's Day 1975. Right? And Farrakhan, with tears in his eyes, and I love him. I met him. I'm not going to say I know him, but I love him. He's a part of our experience. But if we were to take that snapshot, then we would say Minister Farrakhan was probably the most fervent supporter of Wallace D. Muhammad, because he gave a series of lectures around the country in support of Wallace D. Muhammad, Supreme Minister Wallace D. Muhammad.
He still speaks high.
He does, but there was a time when he didn't. So if we were taking those still photos, you're going to have people around the country saying, no, he hates W.D. Muhammad, because I heard him say in 1979, and I heard him say in 1980, see? But those were people who were there for the snapshot. The running video of Minister Farrakhan says that he has a tremendous amount of respect, and should have a tremendous amount of respect for W.D. Muhammad. Sometimes we have to look back, Sharif, and we look back, and it's a personal, introspective kind of event. And we look back and we say to ourselves, if to no one else, that, man, I wish I hadn't done it that way. I wish I hadn't said it that way, or said it at all. All of us have those moments. W.D. Muhammad had those moments. He said, I wish I hadn't dismantled the FOI as quickly as I did. He tried to transition it, but a lot of things were going on that demanded speed, that things happened quickly, because there were forces ready to pounce upon the leadership Nation of Islam that Imam Muhammad had to deal with very quickly, very efficiently, and with a very sharp sword, meaning the tongue. The things he had to say cut a lot of people. So at the time, Minister Farrakhan was in development, and he may not have understood all of the moves that WD had to make. You know, there were other people in place who were making plenty of money off of big-time crime in the Nation of Islam. And W.D. Muhammad had to deal with those people, those elements that said, now that Elijah's gone, and we know this thing is like an $80 million empire, we got to get the getting while the getting is good. W.D. Muhammad had to almost single-handedly deal with those people and save the integrity of the community, of good people who Elijah Muhammad had in his Nation of Islam.
Very thought-provoking. Again, let's switch directions, so to speak. I'm a part of what we talked about earlier. I have a lot of connections, what they call the conscious community or the Pan-African community. I've done talks, I've supported some of the people there, and they know I'm Muslim, but some of their gripe or point of contention, so to speak, is the death of Malcolm. Now, some people in the conscious community say that they can't get down with, Minister Farrakhan or whatever, because they feel like he was responsible or had his hand in it. At that time, which was a very, trying time when Malcolm was assassinated, what was Imam W.D. Muhammad's relationship with Minister Malcolm, and what was his stance on what actually happened to him? Because I know it was a divisionaire. Minister Farrakhan has said that he didn't have nothing, to do with it. I wasn't there. I've talked to, brothers and sisters in the nation. They say people are out of pocket by accusing, him of that. because they weren't, they weren't there. I'm not really going to speak on it, but because this is about W.D. Muhammad's community. What was his stance on his relationship with Malcolm, and where was his stance, to your knowledge, when Malcolm was assassinated?
Yes, you want to?
I'll just make a brief comment on that. Imam Muhammad had a very, very good relationship with Malcolm. Malcolm looked to Imam Muhammad as one of his mentors. He relied on him for, particular religious instruction, and particularly going through what he was going through at that time. And so they had a very strong relationship. And I'll defer to Imam.
Real quick before we go to Imam Bilal, if Malcolm would have lived, what do you think his relationship would have been with W.D. Muhammad, considering the fact that Minister Farrakhan was still here? I mean, just me being a young man, I always think, and sometimes it brings tears to my eyes when I say, what could our community be if all three of these brothers could work together? But, for whatever reason, which direction do you think he would have went?
Based on what my read is of Malcolm and the type of individual, he was a very committed, very devoted, human being. And he was very devoted to his people, to the struggle. I believe that he would have been a very avid supporter of Imam Muhammad. I just believe that, based on, my sense of, Malcolm. And, just the tidbit of history, I had the pleasure of meeting Malcolm right here in Durham. I was a part of the civil rights movement, and we were at Laurie McKissick's office, and Minister Kenneth brought Malcolm to the office, and I had the pleasure of meeting him before he actually spoke that night. So that was something that I treasured.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
My belief is that if Malcolm Shabazz, and that's a hint that I'm throwing out for the conscious community, that you should stop calling him Malcolm X. Why? Because he stopped calling himself Malcolm X before he was assassinated. He was known as Malcolm or Malik Shabazz. So that is the name that Imam W.D. Muhammad put on the masjid or the mosque in Harlem that Malcolm supervised in his lifetime. And that was out of a respect for the work that had been put in by Malcolm in the building of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's organization. That one move right there was really something that could have gotten Imam W.D. Muhammad assassinated also, if it were not for the protection of God.
Yes, right.
Because there were still many people in W.D. Muhammad's organization who hated Malcolm, especially there in Harlem. Right? So again, a lot of different dynamics went into these relationships. There are certain things that Imam Muhammad told me in several interviews that I was blessed to have with him concerning the Nation of Islam. I was doing a film project at the time on the life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We're still progressing with that, but in the interim, we've put out a stage play called Brother Imam. I happen to have the script to that play that can be accessed by people, and we'll put up the information on your site to let them know how. But this is a very important story, especially the years 1958 to 1978, because that, in the cream in the middle of that cookie, is Malcolm's assassination. His assassination and his relationship with Wallace D. Muhammad, Minister Wallace D. Muhammad, a fellow minister. And as Wali mentioned, W.D. Muhammad had a tremendous amount of admiration and respect for the work that Malcolm had put into the building of the Nation of Islam when it was just a few hundred people. Malcolm built it up into the thousands, maybe the millions of admirers of Elijah Muhammad's work and teachings. So we can't discount that. We can't say because you think he made a mistake, or because you think he was a turncoat or a hypocrite, as the bad language goes towards Malcolm from certain people who favor the Nation of Islam teachings. It's all incorrect from top to bottom. Malcolm, if he were still living, would be a firm supporter of W.D. Muhammad. maybe not as a direct quote-unquote follower. He may have gone on to continue his own organizations, Organization of Afro-American Unity, but he also had a religious arm to it, right? And he wanted W.D. Muhammad to be the leader of that religious arm. That Mosque Incorporated that he began, right? He asked him, he said, I need you. I don't have the religious knowledge. Malcolm knew he didn't.
Right.
He knew he was more socio-political.
Yes.
So he was going to handle that aspect. And he wanted W.D. Muhammad, who had been put out of the nation at this very time we're talking. He said, well, since you're out, why don't you come with me? And W.D. Muhammad understood how dangerous that was, number one, to leave his father and the organization that he had been born into as a promise. See, that's what people have to understand. Wallace was a promise from W.D. Farad to Elijah Muhammad and Clara Muhammad. This boy is going to be the leader. He's going to take your place when he becomes 40. Yeah? So that's in Wallace's ears from prenatal, or whatever the word is. You know, while he was in his mother's womb, his mother was saying that to her belly. You're going to be the one. So imagine what she was saying after he got out and she was able to hug him and feed him and walk him around. And she told all of his siblings, this brother here, he's special. Don't treat him like you treat each other. When you go out and play, you don't play rough with this one. You don't just say anything when he's in the room. That's how they trained. Yeah, he was the 7th child born, and that 7 was a special number in the Nation of Islam and in mysticism, right? So he didn't have an ordinary history growing up.
Right.
Even Malcolm was told, Wallace is going to be the one, and Elijah Muhammad told Malcolm, when you have a concern about what's in the Quran or in religion or even the Bible, he said, go to Wallace. And Malcolm put that in his book. He said, because he is the wisest among them in terms of the understanding of Islam. Elijah Muhammad said, I'm not here. He told all of his followers, I'm not here to teach you so much religion. Everybody knows that. Minister Farrakhan, they all know that. Wallace said, Elijah Muhammad, may Allah rest his soul, and bless him in paradise for the great work that he put in. He said, I'm not here to teach religion. He said, someone will come after me and do that. You see? And he said, I'm here to save what?
Humanity.
The baby from the fire.
Yes, sir.
And he said we were a baby nation, talking about all black people, not just his group. He said, I'm here to save the black man, all 17 million of them, and give them keys. He was offering keys. Right? So these are things that are in the lessons of Elijah Muhammad, that Elijah Muhammad himself advanced the logic connected to those lessons. Some of them he paid less attention on as his Nation of Islam began to grow into different levels of development. There was a lesson that said you're to take 4 heads of devils and present them to us. And do you know that back in the 40s, there were brothers who were so literal with Elijah Muhammad's language that they went and actually found white people and chopped their heads off and tried to bring them to Elijah Muhammad. Right in New York, you had a brother who knocked on the door of, who was then the captain, as Yusuf Shah, may Allah forgive him his sins, grant him paradise. And he said, man, I need you to see something. And he brought him to the trunk of his car, and there were 4 heads in there. He said, man, are you out of your mind? That's not what Elijah Muhammad was talking. So that stuff was going on in the 30s and the 40s to the point where Elijah Muhammad withdrew it. He said, don't, that's not what that means, he said. Don't, forget 4 heads, don't worry about what that means. Because it's not what you think. Again, content, context, okay? Elijah Muhammad's vision for where he needed to go changed when? 1959, the year I was born actually, 1959. What happened? He made Umrah, or the mini Hajj, to Mecca, to Jeddah, Mecca, Medina. He went to these places. He chose the smaller version of it so that he wouldn't get lost in the sauce, as we say. And he had a very wonderful Arab delegate, a person who led him around everywhere he went, holding his hand, literally holding his hand around Mecca, showing him the Kaaba, showing him all of the rites and the rituals that were a part of that experience. But Elijah Muhammad's teacher, W.D. Farad, and here's what a lot of followers of Minister Farrakhan are not aware of also. He said that Mecca, the streets of Mecca, were flowing with milk and honey. There were diamonds and gold on the ground. Mm-hmm. You could go there and oh man, Mecca. So what happened when Elijah Muhammad went? He's looking for diamonds and gold, right? I would be.
Yes.
And you know what he found? Poverty. Mm-hmm. He found poverty. Mm-hmm. People naked because they couldn't afford clothing in Mecca, going around the Kaaba. I'm not talking about before Prophet Muhammad. I'm talking about in the time of Elijah Muhammad. Mm-hmm. Poor, and there's still poor people in Mecca like that, even though Mecca is $1 trillion interest in the world. But the Muslims are not getting the benefit of that interest or that wealth. Mm-hmm. Just small families are, right? We know that, right? So my point is, Elijah Muhammad came back and he took the emphasis off of anything dealing with religion. Because he understood, I'm not the one to teach that. That's when he started saying, I don't do that. Mm-hmm. I don't do religion. Mm-hmm. I do saving babies from fire.
Mm-hmm. One second.
Yes.
You had said something profound earlier about the two aspects of Malcolm. One, a religious aspect, and one like a social change.
Yeah.
Social change aspect. Mm-hmm. So again, going back to the conscious community or people who are, real avid and have a lot of love for Malcolm. One, because this is about clarifying, misconceptions. Another point of contention that I hear with people in the conscious community or people, that not too sure about Islam is that, Minister Farrakhan addresses the social, aspects, and he gives us, spirituality, and he helped wake me up, and I'm not too sure. It seems like W.D. Muhammad kind of got lost. I think some of it is his choice of not just wanting to be out in the forefront. That many people talk about how him leaning more towards an Arab concept, and he's almost, people use the language, he's sellout, more Farrakhan. Mm-hmm. He speaks for us. I don't even know who W.D. Muhammad is. Mm-hmm. So how do you think he got lost with him having as many followers? Because they've done statistics, and I believe he brought in at least 2-3 million people at one time. But somehow Minister Farrakhan is like the face of helping black suffering. Mm-hmm. Is that by W.D. Muhammad's choice to just say, hey, I'm going to concentrate on the religious aspect, or was Farrakhan, is he the one to look at? Because I'm going to be honest, that's how I got my awakening. When I was in high school, it was in the 90s when I was in high school. I didn't learn about Imam W.D. Muhammad, later. I was open, but I don't know if that's by design.
Well, it's like I mentioned earlier about my intro into this whole experience. Farrakhan was my intro. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm a W.D. Muhammad man today. Mm-hmm. Farrakhan was my intro in 1973. But because someone is your intro, it doesn't mean that he's your interest.
Right.
The interest was truth and righteousness and brotherhood and community development. So whoever has the best program for that is the one that we should pay attention to. I'm not saying follow. I don't like the word follow or anything. But he's the one, or she is the one, or they are the ones that we should pay attention to. All right? Now, content and context. Maybe you should label this interchange, content and context. Minister Farrakhan preaches more from the Bible, much more. He's shy when it comes to preaching from the Quran because of whatever is in his mind about the Quran and his understanding of the Quran. But he's a Bible man. He's in that church. He's in those churches. He's got those preachers. And I say good because he's giving them something that they can't get in the church teachings. That's fine. But there are more African American Christians in America than there are Muslims. So proportionately, if you're teaching from the book where the majority of people are fascinated by that language, you're going to appear to have the greater influence. However, And you might say that about the whole world. The Bible and Christianity has conquered